The roster for the biggest and hungriest faction in Total War Warhammer 3 has been revealed. The Ogre Kingdoms will be the bonus for anyone that buys the game within the first week of release or pre-orders early. The Ogres only care about power and will either buy it with money or gorge themselves until they're the biggest and fattest, and therefore the best. And the fattest among them is Greasus, Goldtooth, one of the two playable legendary lords in this faction race pack. Or going by his formal title, Trade Lord Greasus, Tribe Sealer, Drake Crush, Gate Crasher, Horde Master, Goldtooth, the shockingly obese. Ogre tyrants now flock to his Goldtooth tribe to bathe in his overflowing coffers and sweaty musk. Too rich to walk, he's pushed into battle by Noblar servants, who carry his riches and a roasted ox wherever he goes. A terror on the battlefield, he likes to give his enemies a taste of success by whacking them with a scepter of gold and gemstones. His unique abilities are Everyone Has Their Price, where Greasus rolls up and makes it rain gold on his opponents, and the Scepter of Titans, which gives Greasus huge power boosts when fighting other ogres. But the other legendary lord, Scrag the Slaughterer, has found power as the prophet of the Great Maw. Scrag the Gore Harvester, the Maw that walks, drags his massive cooking pot behind him wherever he goes, hacking his enemies apart so that he leaves a trail of dismembered limbs in his wake that his personal Gore Noblars retrieve to cook later. Once a famed slaughter master, he accidentally cooked his tyrant lord's favorite Noblar and had his arms chopped off and a cooking pot permanently attached to him in revenge. But the experience left him as one of the world's most powerful wielders of the ogre's unique gut magic. Called the Lore of the Great Maw, it's all about gaining magical abilities through culinary conquest, which includes Brain Gobbler, a hex that lowers leadership on an enemy unit by having the spellcaster chomp into an enemy's skull to learn their worst fears. Bull Gorger, a melee and armor-piercing buff on a unit where you first eat the heart of a Rhinox. Tooth Cracker increases armor and missile resistance for all units in an area by eating a hunk of tooth-breaking granite and drawing inspiration from its sturdiness. Bone Crusher, a small AoE explosion that deals armor-piercing damage by stuffing a handful of bones into your mouth to summon a giant fist from the sky. Troll Guts, that heal a unit over time because even troll meat can heal itself and ogre mages will eat it to unlock that secret. And the Maw, a huge explosion where Scrag calls on the power of the Great Maw itself and has the ground split open and eat his enemies. As well as gut magic, Scrag can also summon units of Gorgers to his side for lore reasons that I'll go into later in his noob's guide. It actually gets kind of long. But for now, just know that they share a bond only ravenously hungry cannibal ogres and Coachella survivors can truly appreciate. For generic lords, ogres have tyrants, the biggest, strongest, and undoubtedly fattest examples of their race. To be an ogre ruler, tyrants have to be able to wrestle giants, crush walls, and shoot lightning bolts out of their backsides. But if you like a bit more gut magic in your life, the Slaughter Master Lord has you covered. These ogres are normally given a wide berth by their tribe, as it's unwise to stand too close to a slaughter master when they're looking for cooking ingredients. These expert butchers can proudly boast that there's nothing that walks or crawls that they haven't chopped up and garnished for a ritual feast, and it's because of that great gut magic that they have access to the lore of the Great Maw and the lore of beasts. For heroes, ogres can call on solitary wanderers and exiles. These hunters survive on savvy and ferocity and learn how to track and kill on their own, else the hunter becomes the hunted. The most celebrated ogre hunters tame ferocious stone horns as mounts. The only way to break one is to pluck out an eye, but if he manages it, the hunter gains a loyal companion, fierce friend, and mobile snack for all their troubles. Butchers are ogre mage heroes, a bit more rotund than your average ogre with even worse hygiene, caked in dried blood and organs with chunks of butchered meat hanging off of them. But their array of meat hooks, cleavers, and filleting knives can be brought to bear on a moment's notice. Of all the ogres in this roster, they're the only ones that don't wear a gut plate to protect their stomachs, instead entrusting their holy gastrointestinal systems to the protection of the Great Maw, for which they're rewarded with access to the lore of the Great Maw and the lore of beasts. Firebellies are a different type of hero altogether. They're roaring, blazing priests of the Fire Mouth, an ogre deity created from the largest volcano in the Mountains of Morn. These prophets of fire are initiated into the cult by being dipped into the volcano to drink lava hot from the source. which, surprise, is a trial that very few ogres survived. But those that do are permanently hairless, ruddy-skinned, and covered in tattoos and tribal symbols. Besides having access to the lore of fire, these fire bellies gain special magical abilities from their gastrointestinal combustion. Fire Breath, an explosive magic missile that deals fire and AP damage, Flame Incarnate, a ward save that reflects melee damage, and Eruption, an explosion that emanates fire and magic damage from the fire belly. But even heroes need an army behind them, so let's look at the Ogre Kingdoms infantry roster, which is minuscule to say the least, and there is nothing lower on the ogre chain of command than a Gnoblar. But even then, ogre armies couldn't exist without these tiny green minions to clean, cook, and, do all the actual work around the place. Wicked and absolutely malicious, Gnoblars are as dim as a chunk of coal at midnight. They're related to goblins and stand about 3 feet tall, and ogres only tolerate them because Gnoblars lack the strength to do any real damage to them, and also they can fetch food on the double. In battle, Gnoblars are expendable meat shields who survive only long enough for the big boys to get into place and do the real whacking. Slow and with low leadership, Gnoblars are really just the worst. Gnoblar trappers are missile infantry who delight in catching and torturing small mammals. They use traps because hunting is too sporting and implies a fair chance. In battle, they're just as expendable as regular Gnoblars, though with Vanguard deployment, these trappers are useful to harass enemies. When an enemy unit gets too close, Gnoblar hunters can even throw out traps to deal damage and slow them down, effectively stopping a charge in its tracks. Which brings us to Ogre Monstrous Infantry. Ogre bulls we all saw in Warhammer 2, recruitable from wandering camps. Big, brutish, and exceedingly violent, these ogres are simple and prefer to use brawn to solve all their problems. Really, you can think of them like American football linemen. They prefer to barge into combat using their huge girth as a weapon, then swat aside anything they haven't crushed with a metric tonnage of fat and muscle. For variants, there are the regular ogre bulls with a club, dual weapons, and iron fists, who wear heavy metal gauntlets and prefer to punch anything close at hand. Dual weapon bulls have a bonus against infantry, while iron fists have melee defense and armor and count as shielded. All ogres in the roster, though, cause fear and can destroy walls and gates in battle, making even these bottom-tier units weighty opponents. Iron Guts are tribe members with enough status to have earned their armor. They charge into battle with massive two-handed weapons that deal armor-piercing damage. Giant scimitars, iron warhammers, or just a tree with rocks tied onto it. It doesn't matter, they're still going to hit you with it. Veterans of many battles and feasts, Iron Guts can drink you under the table, eat you out of your house, and then likely burn down your house because it sounds fun. Man-eaters are mercenaries who have traveled far and wide and adopted local styles of dress. The ones here were the breeches, feathered tricorns, and pistols of the Empire. And races across the old world hire these man-eaters with the promise of gold, food, and power. They get their name from less scrupulous commanders who offer the ogres their choice of bodies to eat fresh from the battlefield. Really, they're the next tier of ogre infantry and come with variants for Iron Fist, great weapons, and even pistols. Due to their combat experience, all man-eaters are immune to psychology, and even picked up the Empire Pistolier's ability to fire while moving. They just do it a bit slower, as they're more likely to eat a horse than find one big enough to carry them. The Saber-Tusk Pack are leonine predators from the Mountains of Morn, capable of bringing down even the largest of beasts with their elongated tusks. Saber-Tusk Packs are the fastest thing in the ogre army, and though powerful, will rampage if hurt. But if you put an expert hunter-hero in the same army, Saber-Tusks can be buffed with Vanguard deployment, Stalk, and Frenzy, making them a very versatile unit. Gorgers are ogres on a strict seafood diet. They see the food and they eat it, no matter how disgusting. But that's what happens when an ogre gets thrown out of their tribe. They have to survive any way they can. Driven mad by hunger, they're unbreakable in battle and have become hangry eating machines of sinew and claw that attack with a frenzy. Gorgers can even distend their jaws like snakes to shove in more food, and while fragile, Gorgers can surprise enemies with Vanguard deployment, high speed, and armor-piercing anti-infantry attacks. Giants are enormous, lumbering morons who stride the world in search of food and booze. If an ogre tyrant can restrain himself from attacking a giant to prove his superiority, he'll be recruited into the tribe, as they have even more strength and power than an ogre tyrant, though more lightly armored. Stonehorns are massive, angry beasts that are living fossils, with their skeletons made of the same hardened rock as the mountains they call home. Legendarily hardy and belligerent, Stonehorns will go out of their way to headbutt you to death and trample your corpse into a paste. They have the terror attribute in battle and deal immense damage with huge levels of missile resistance, but can be induced to rampage if you're not careful. Ogres have such respect for Stonehorns that they're willing to risk life and limb to ride them, and some unknown ogre Einstein came up with the idea of strapping a harpoon launcher to a Stonehorn's back to then ride pell-mell into crowds of enemies. It's easily the best invention of any ogre ever, and combines the ferocity of a Stonehorn with a highly mobile ballista siege engine. For missile monsters and beasts, ogres have lead belchers. They're easy enough to spot on the battlefield as they're scorched and blackened from countless powder burns, and are often deaf from the repeated close-range explosions of their repurposed cannons. They have redonkulous range for missile infantry with armor piercing, and even when they run out of ammo, they are still ogres with a giant iron club. For cavalry, ogres start out with Mournfang cavalry. Hardy predators with thick-skinned and muscles strong enough to carry an ogre, their riders carry regular clubs but also come in Iron Fist and Great Weapon variants. Either way, it essentially gives even more weight and speed to an ogre charge and ensures that anything in Mournfang cavalry's path won't be there after. Crushers are ogres riding woolly rhinox, who are known to lower their head and charge anything that moves. Some ogres don't think that riding a Mournfang is proper hard enough, and decided to ascend to absolute unit status by sitting atop a Rhinox, and they come in Iron Fist and Great Weapon versions for extra punching power. For artillery and war machines, you need a mind more cunningly brutal, so Noblars happily provide scrap launchers for ogre armies. These Rhinox-pulled catapults wouldn't pass an OSHA inspection, but scrap launchers may fire anything they can find. They have massive range for a siege weapon and are really meant to attack unarmored units. But even if they run out of ammo, they'll happily let their Rhinox trample anything that gets too close. Iron Blasters are ogres that have strapped ancient cannons developed by extinct hyper-intelligence giants onto a Rhinox, and that is every bit as awesome as you think it is. Iron Blasters will annihilate anything they target, and though they have a low ammo count, they are still pulled by a Rhinox though, so they're hardly defenseless once they run out. And that's the Ogre Kingdoms roster. They're not green, they're not Mongolian, and Greases is riding a wooden wheelbarrow, but I'll be damned if they're not the faction I'm most excited for in Warhammer 3. A real melting pot of strength and hunger, with ludicrously powerful cavalry and giant siege guns. The Ogre Kingdoms will be available for free if you order Total War Warhammer 3 from now until the end of the first week after it releases, so follow the link in the video description if that interests you. Regardless, subscribe to this channel to be notified about future Total War news if you're into that sort of thing, or maybe even join the Patreon or our Discord to support in their creation. But as always, thanks for watching.
The Great War's angry!